I hate maintenance duty in the deep shafts, especially when I'm alone, dangling 2,000 feet down, with nothing but old memories and the soft hum of my safety harness for company. The vibration started small, barely noticeable against the usual subterranean ambience I'd grown used to over my years as a tunnel engineer. But something about them set my teeth on edge. "Control, this is Chen. Getting some weird readings down here." I adjusted my harness, the BioLite tattoos on my arms casting a soft blue glow across the shaft walls. Pattern doesn't match anything in the database. Static crackled through my earpiece before Control responded. "Copy that, Mole. What kind of weird are we talking about?" I pressed my hand against the rough stone, feeling the tremors through the enhanced sensory nodes in my palms. "It's rhythmic, too regular to be tectonic." The vibrations grew stronger as I spoke, sending small cascades of dust and debris down the shaft. "Permission to abort maintenance and investigate." "Granted. But Chen." The operator's voice carried an edge I rarely heard. "Be careful. We're getting similar reports from Sectors 7 through 12. That got my attention. Sectors 7 through 12 covered nearly a quarter of New Denver's underground border. Whatever this was, it wasn't local. I detached my secondary safety line and began ascending, my mind racing through possibilities. Earthquake precursors, new geological instability, or something worse. My comm crackled again, but this time it wasn't Control. "Marcus," Echo's familiar voice, tense with concern. "Get to my library as soon as you're topside. There's something you need to see." I quickened my pace. In 15 years of friendship, I'd never heard James "Echo" Sullivan sound quite so worried. "What is it?" "Not over comms," he replied. "Just hurry." The ascent felt endless. By the time I reached the main level, the vibrations had grown strong enough that people were gathering in corridors, their faces showing mixtures of concern and curiosity. Most had never felt anything like this in their lives. Underground cities like New Denver were built to be stable, using natural caverns and reinforced tunnels to create a safe haven for what remained of humanity. I made my way through the crowded passages toward Echo's library, my enhanced retinal implants automatically adjusting to the varying light levels of different sectors. The library itself was a marvel, carved directly into the rock face and filled floor to ceiling with books, artifacts, and data crystals. Echo stood at his main research terminal, his cybernetic left arm interfaced directly with the system. He didn't look up as I entered. "Close the door," he said, his voice grave. I sealed the heavy door behind me, noting the way his artifacts trembled slightly on their shelves. "What's going on, Echo?" He finally looked up, his adaptive glasses reflecting streams of data. "They're here." "Who's here?" Instead of answering, he projected a holographic image into the air between us. It showed the surface a sight few of us had ever seen in person. The barren landscape we'd all learned about in history classes filled the display, but something was different. Massive shapes descended through the clouds, their designs clearly artificial and utterly alien. "That's live feed," Echo said quietly, "from our surface monitors." My mouth went dry. Impossible. The surface is supposed to be uninhabitable. That's why we're down here. That's why the Great Descent happened. Echo's cybernetic arm whirred as he pulled up more data. "Is it? Take a look at this." He projected another image, this one showing ancient documents. "I found these sealed in a secure archive. They're dated before the Great Descent, before the supposed environmental collapse that drove us underground." I studied the documents, my engineer's mind automatically analyzing the technical specifications they contained. They were plans detailed schematics for underground cities, power systems, and infrastructure, all dated decades before humanity supposedly needed them. "They knew," I whispered. "They built these cities before they convinced everyone the surface was becoming uninhabitable," Echo finished. "The question is, why?" The vibrations intensified, and a proximity alarm blared through the library's speakers. Echo's arm sparked as it processed new data. "They're landing," he said. Multiple sites across the old continental United States, and they're bringing drilling equipment. My blood ran cold. They think Earth is abandoned, that nobody's here. Exactly. Echo pulled up a map showing the alien landing sites. Several were disturbingly close to New Denver's outer tunnel network. But they're about to learn differently if we don't do something. Those drills, Marcus, they'll breach our outer tunnels within hours. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the gray strands that had appeared far too early in my life. We need to redirect them. Make them think this area is geologically unstable or something. I know these tunnels better than anyone. Maybe we can trigger some controlled collapses. Make them think. A massive tremor cut me off, sending books tumbling from shelves. Echo steadied himself against his desk. Whatever we're going to do, we need to do it fast. The next hour was a blur of activity. I coordinated with my engineering teams while Echo dug deeper into his historical archives, looking for anything that might help us. The aliens had deployed 3 drilling platforms near our perimeter, their machinery far more advanced than anything we'd ever developed. Look at these readings, I said, showing Echo the data from our seismic monitors. They're not just drilling randomly, they're following a pattern, like they're looking for something specific. Echo's glasses flickered as he analyzed the data. Or they found something specific. Marcus, these drilling sites correspond exactly with locations marked in those pre-descent plans. Almost like whoever built our cities knew they were coming, I finished. Another violent shake rattled the library. Echo's arm sparked again as new alerts flooded in. Breach in Sector 9. They've broken through the outer shell. I was already moving, grabbing my emergency kit. I need to get down there. If they breach the inner tunnels. Wait, Echo caught my arm. There's something else you need to know. Those plans I found, they're not just city schematics. There's something else built into these tunnels, something hidden so well it's not even in the main engineering databases. I thought about all the odd readings I'd gotten over the years, the strange echoes and unexplained power draws. What kind of something? Defenses, he said grimly. But activating them might be as dangerous for us as for them. The plans are incomplete. I don't know exactly what they'll do. Another alarm blared. The drilling was getting closer to populated areas. I made my decision. Show me what you found. If we're going to save everyone, we need every option on the table. Echo nodded and began transferring data to my portable display. As I absorbed the information, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with a cave air. Our ancestors hadn't just built these cities for protection, they'd built them as fortresses. And they'd left us one hell of a surprise for anyone who came looking. How soon can you get these systems online? I asked. 20 minutes, maybe less. But Marcus. Echo hesitated. We don't know why they're here. They might not be hostile. They're drilling into inhabited areas without attempting communication, I pointed out. That's hostile enough for me. Get the systems ready, but don't activate anything yet. I'm heading down to Sector 9. Maybe we can solve this without revealing everything we've got. I left Echo in his library and made my way through increasingly panicked crowds toward the breach site. My BioLite tattoos glowed brighter with my rising adrenaline, casting strange shadows on the tunnel walls. The vibrations were constant now, and I could hear the alien drilling getting closer. When I reached Sector 9, I found organized chaos. My engineering teams had already begun emergency reinforcement procedures, but we all knew it was just buying time. I checked my displays, looking at the overlays Echo had sent me. Somewhere in these walls, our ancestors had hidden systems beyond anything we currently possessed. The question was, could we risk using them? Sir, one of my junior engineers ran up, dust covering his face. They're through the second layer. 10 minutes, maybe less, until they breach the main cavity. I looked at the drilling point, then at the hidden systems Echo had revealed. Sometimes being an engineer meant making impossible choices. Sometimes it meant gambling with not just your own life, but everyone's. I opened my comm channel. Echo, you reading me? Clear as crystal, old friend. Remember when we first met? You told me the past holds lessons for the future. There was a pause. You're going to do something stupid, aren't you? I managed a grim smile. Activate the systems. All of them. Marcus. Do it. I felt the change immediately. A low hum began resonating through the tunnels, different from the alien drilling. Power readings spiked across my displays as ancient machinery came to life. The very rock around us seemed to vibrate at a new frequency. The alien drilling suddenly stopped. Through the remaining rock barrier, I could hear their machines screaming in protest. Whatever our ancestors had built into these walls, it was working. They're pulling back, someone shouted. All 3 drilling sites, they're withdrawing. I watched the sensor readings, hardly daring to breathe. The alien ships were indeed retreating, their equipment apparently disrupted by our activated defenses. But we just revealed our hand. They knew now that Earth wasn't abandoned, and they knew whoever lived here had technology that could affect their machines. Echo, I said quietly into my calm. What else was in those files? What aren't you telling me? His response was equally soft. The rest of the plan, Marcus. They're not just for defending these cities. They're for retaking the surface. I looked up at the rock ceiling above me, thinking about the alien ships now retreating into the sky. We'd won this round, but we'd also started something. Something our ancestors had apparently been preparing for a very long time. Get everything you found, I told him. Every scrap of information. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Why 10 minutes? Because in 9 minutes, I'm going to finish throwing up from dangling in that maintenance shaft earlier, and then we're going to figure out what the hell our ancestors got us into. The calm went silent for a moment. Then Echo's laugh, strained but genuine, came through. I'll have coffee waiting. We're going to need it. As I headed back toward his library, I couldn't help wondering what other secrets were hidden in these tunnels, and more importantly, what secrets were waiting for us on the surface we'd abandoned so long ago. One thing was certain: the aliens would be back, and next time, they'd be ready for us. We needed to be ready for them too. I've broken into secure archives before, but this was different. Echo's cybernetic arm whirred softly as he worked on the ancient locking mechanism, his enhanced fingers moving with surgical precision. 3 weeks had passed since we'd driven off the alien drilling attempts, and in that time, we'd discovered dozens of similar archives scattered throughout New Denver's deepest levels. You sure about this one? I asked, checking our surroundings for the 10th time. This archive was different from the others, heavily shielded, triple-locked, and buried beneath layers of security that predated the Great Descent. According to the indices I've decoded, Echo muttered, still focused on the lock. This vault contains the original planning documents. Not copies, not summaries, the actual reason we went underground. The lock clicked, and Echo's arm sparked. A door I hadn't even noticed began to slide open, revealing a small room bathed in soft blue light, the same color as my navigation tattoos. That's impossible, I breathed. This technology, it matches our current systems. Echo stepped inside, his adaptive glasses rapidly scanning the contents. No, Marcus, our current systems match this technology. Everything we think we developed, we're just rediscovering what they already built. The room was smaller than Echo's private library, but every surface was covered with data crystals and hardened storage devices. In the center stood a single pedestal with a handprint scanner. Echo approached it cautiously. Wait, I said, grabbing his arm. The last time we activated old systems, we advertised our presence to the aliens. We should. A hologram flickered to life above the pedestal, showing a face I knew from historical records. Dr. Sarah Chen, my grandmother. If you're seeing this, the hologram said, then the harbingers have returned, and my grandson has followed the path I hoped he would. My knees went weak. Echo caught me before I could fall, his cybernetic arm whirring with the sudden movement. The hologram continued, my grandmother's face showing a mixture of pride and worry that I remembered from my childhood. Marcus, if you're watching this, then you've already encountered their first probe. The drilling attempts, the surface landings, all exactly as we predicted. What you don't know yet is that humanity didn't go underground because the surface became uninhabitable. We went underground to hide, to prepare, to survive what we knew was coming. Echo's glasses were recording everything as my grandmother's hologram explained how, 60 years ago, humanity's first deep space sensors detected something approaching our solar system. Something massive, something artificial. The world's governments had made a choice. Instead of facing this unknown threat directly, we would disappear, make Earth appear abandoned. But we didn't all go underground, my grandmother's hologram revealed. Some of us stayed above. Volunteers who would maintain the illusion of a dead planet while helping to develop and test the defense systems you've recently discovered. Marcus, your parents weren't killed in a tunnel collapse. They were surface observers, and they found something we never expected. My heart stopped. For 20 years, I'd believed my parents died in an accident, that their bodies were lost in a cave and too dangerous to excavate. But they'd been on the surface all this time? The hologram shifted, showing recordings from the surface. Not the barren wasteland we'd been taught about, but something very different. Small, hidden communities. Carefully cultivated forests and fields, disguised from aerial observation. And people surface dwellers who'd adapted to life under the fake story of environmental collapse. Your parents discovered that the surface populations had begun to change, my grandmother continued. Subtle mutations, accelerated evolution driven by the trace radiation we used to justify the evacuation. They're still human, but different, enhanced. And now that the harbingers have arrived, these surface dwellers are humanity's greatest secret weapon. Echo's arms suddenly sparked violently. Marcus, we've got problems. Big ones. Surface sensors are picking up massive energy signatures. The aliens are back, and they've brought friends. The hologram flickered as if responding to Echo's warning. If you're seeing this next part, my grandmother said, then they've returned in force. There are protocols in place. Contingencies. The surface dwellers will know what to do, assuming they've maintained the old networks. Find them, Marcus. Find Protocol Lazarus. The hologram faded, leaving us in the dim blue light of the archive. I stood there, trying to process everything I'd learned. My whole life, everything I'd believed about my family, about why we lived underground, all of it built on carefully constructed lies. Marcus, Echo said urgently, we need to move. Those energy signatures, they're not just ships this time, they're deploying ground forces. I checked my own displays, watching as dozens of alien signatures appeared on the surface above New Denver. Why? They know we can interfere with their technology. Why risk ground forces? Echo's glasses flashed as he processed more data. Because they're not alone up there. I'm picking up human signatures. Surface dwellers, fighting alongside them. What? Why would they? Think about it, Echo interrupted. From their perspective, we're the ones who abandoned the surface, who left them up there while we hid underground. And now we've revealed ourselves by using technology they probably think we stole from our ancestors. He had a point. If I'd spent generations on the surface, believing I'd been abandoned by the rest of humanity, I might not be too friendly either. Especially if technologically advanced aliens showed up offering an alliance. We need to get to the surface, I said. Find these people, explain what really happened. Already working on it. Echo's arm interfaced with a nearby terminal. Your grandmother's files included access codes for emergency exits, routes even most of the engineering corps doesn't know about. We can be topside in 20 minutes. I hesitated. In my entire life, I'd never been to the surface. Never seen the sky except in historical recordings. Never felt real wind or rain. The thought sent a shiver of claustrophobia through me, the same fear I fought every time I worked in the deep maintenance shafts. What about the defense systems? I asked. We can't just leave New Denver unprotected. Already handled. I've transferred control to a secure subnet. We can activate them remotely if needed. Echo paused, looking at me seriously. But Marcus, are you sure about this? Once we go up there, My parents are up there, I said firmly. Or were. Either way, we need answers, and we need to stop this fighting before it gets worse. Echo nodded and began gathering specific data crystals from the archive. Grab anything else that looks important. Once we leave, we might not be able to get back in here. As we worked, I couldn't help thinking about my grandmother's last words. Protocol Lazarus, named after the biblical figure who rose from the dead. Was that what we were about to do? Raise humanity from its underground tomb. 20 minutes later, we stood in a narrow tunnel I'd never known existed. According to Echo's maps, it led to a surface exit nearly a mile from the nearest alien landing site. Far enough to avoid immediate detection, close enough to reach the nearest surface settlement. Ready? Echo asked, his arm glowing softly as it processed surface sensor data. I checked my own equipment one last time. Emergency supplies, portable shield generator, and a neural interface that would let me access New Denver systems remotely. Ready as I'll ever be. The tunnel sloped upward at an angle that made my legs burn. After 10 minutes of climbing, we reached a heavy door marked with symbols I'd seen in my grandmother's recordings. Echo interfaced with the control panel, and with a soft hiss, the door began to open. Light, real sunlight. It stabbed into my eyes despite my retinal implants' best efforts to compensate. The air that rushed in was different from anything I'd ever breathed, richer, wilder, filled with scents I couldn't identify. And the space. So much space. No walls, no ceiling, just endless sky above us. Movement, Echo whispered, his glasses scanning the landscape. 300 meters north. Human signatures. I forced myself to focus past the overwhelming sensations of the surface world. In the distance, I could see figures moving through what looked like cultivated fields, hidden under canopies designed to break up aerial observation. The surface dwellers had gotten very good at staying hidden. They know we're here, I said, noticing how the figures were moving to surround our position. Echo. I see them. Their tech signatures are, Marcus, they're more advanced than we are. Those mutations your grandmother mentioned, they've been upgrading themselves. Before I could respond, a voice called out from behind us. Hands where we can see them, tunnelers. We turned slowly. The woman pointing what looked like an energy weapon at us was tall, heavily muscled, with skin that seemed to shift colors to match her surroundings. Active camouflage, but biological rather than technological. We're not here to fight, I said carefully. We're looking for Protocol Lazarus. The woman's eyes narrowed. They were silver, reflecting the sunlight like mirrors. Where did you hear that name? From Dr. Sarah Chen, my grandmother. The weapon lowered slightly. Sarah's boy's boy? The engineer? A pause. Prove it. I held up my arms, letting my navigation tattoos glow. The woman nodded slowly. Those are original patterns. Implementation gang signs. Sarah helped design them. She lowered her weapon completely. I knew your parents. My heart skipped. They're dead. 5 years ago, defending this settlement from the first Harbinger scout ship. Before we knew what they were. She gestured to the other figures emerging from cover. I'm Helen. I was your mother's second in command. Echo's arm whirred as it processed Helen's bioreadings. You're not just surface adapted. You're second-generation Genesis strain. And you're running hardware that's 2 decades obsolete, Helen replied. The world didn't stop just because you all went underground. We evolved, adapted, prepared. She looked at me closely. The Harbingers are back in force because they found what your parents died protecting. A key to accessing humanity's old defense grid. The real one, not the local systems you tunnelers think are so impressive. I thought about the aliens landing across the surface, about the divisions between our peoples that had led surface dwellers to ally with them. How many settlements are working with the Harbingers? Too many, Helen admitted. They believe the aliens' promises of restoration, of unity. They don't know what your parents discovered, that the Harbingers have done this before. Thousands of worlds. Always the same pattern. Find a species that's apparently abandoned their planet, offer help to any survivors, then use them to access the planet's resources before discarding them. And Protocol Lazarus? Echo asked. Helen smiled grimly. It's not a protocol, it's a place. A facility built before the Great Descent. The reason we really went underground. She looked up at the sky, where alien ships were visible even through the afternoon light. Want to see it? I gazed at the surface world, so different from everything I'd known, yet somehow familiar. My parents had died defending this place, these people, and somewhere out there were answers to questions I hadn't even known to ask. Lead the way, I said. As we followed Helen through the hidden paths of the surface world, I couldn't help thinking about my grandmother's final message. We hadn't gone underground to hide from a dying world. We'd gone underground to survive what was coming. And now, generations later, it was time for humanity, all of humanity, to face that threat together. Assuming, of course, we could convince everyone to stop fighting each other first. I never thought I'd witness the end of the world from the surface. Through the periscope cameras, I watched as Helen's former allies led a column of Harbinger forces directly toward one of New Denver's main entrance hubs. The surface dwellers moved with unnatural grace, their adapted bodies flowing like liquid metal under the morning sun. Behind them, the aliens deployed what looked like mining equipment far larger than the drills they'd tried before. They're going to breach the primary shield, Echo said, his cybernetic arm interfacing with the facility's ancient systems. Even with everything we've activated, we can't stop equipment that size. Helen stood at the facility's main control center, her color-shifting skin reflecting the soft blue glow of the surrounding displays. We'd spent the last 12 hours in this place, Protocol Lazarus, and I still couldn't quite believe what we'd found. It wasn't just a facility. It was a command center built into a hollowed-out mountain, the real reason humanity had gone underground. Not to hide, not just to survive, but to protect this place until it was needed. Your parents died protecting these coordinates, Helen said, her silver eyes fixed on the tactical displays. They knew if the Harbingers found this place before we were ready, everything we'd planned would fail. And are we ready now? I asked, watching more alien ships descend through the clouds. My navigation tattoos pulsed with nervous energy, casting strange shadows across the crystalline walls. Helen's skin rippled with patterns I was learning to recognize as stress. The surface settlements that sided with the Harbingers. They think they're leading them to underground raiders. Scavengers who hoarded resources and technology while leaving them to survive alone. She turned to me. They don't know about the Generation Project, about what your grandmother and the other scientists really built down there. Echo's glasses flashed as he processed more data. Multiple breaches detected. They're into the outer tunnels. Surface allies are leading them straight to the trap, I finished, because that's what New Denver really was. What all our underground cities were. Not just shelters, but massive technological webs designed to channel energy in very specific ways. Ways that would only work if the Harbingers took exactly the path we'd spent generations preparing. My grandmother's final message played in my mind. The cities aren't just cities. They're circuit boards, built to human scale. And humanity, all of humanity, were the processors. The display showed more ships landing. Hundreds of them now, spread across the surface of our supposedly abandoned world. Each one following the energy signatures we'd deliberately leaked. Each one moving their forces exactly where we needed them. Echo, I said quietly, show them what we found in the archive, about the surface evacuation. He nodded, projecting a hologram into the center of the room. Historical footage showed the real reason for the Great Descent, not a dying surface, but a carefully orchestrated migration. Underground shelters that doubled as evolutionary acceleration chambers. Surface populations deliberately left to adapt and change in specific ways. All of it designed to create two distinct branches of humanity, one bound to the earth, one free to adapt to the sky. Your evolution wasn't random, I told Helen. The radiation, the environmental changes, it was all calculated. Just like our underground development was guided by the city designs themselves. Helen's skin had gone almost transparent, a sign of deep emotional distress. "You're saying we were engineered, that everything we suffered, everything we achieved, was part of the plan," Echo confirmed. "The Harbingers don't just strip mine planets. They harvest species, collect them, study them, absorb anything useful before moving on. Your parents found proof that they'd been here before, Marcus, long before, and humanity. We learned from them, prepared for them, used their own tactics against them." The tactical displays blared new warnings. The Harbinger forces had reached the inner tunnels of New Denver. Surface allies were leading them confidently through the maze like passages, not realizing that every step took them further into the most elaborate trap ever constructed. "It's time," Helen said, her skin settling into a deep, determined blue. "If we're going to unite our people, it has to be now, before the final phase begins." I nodded and opened a broadcast channel to all surface settlements and underground cities. My voice would reach every human on and under the surface of Earth. The truth, after generations of secrets and separation. "My name is Marcus Chen," I began. "What I'm about to tell you will sound impossible, but every word is true. We are not enemies. We are not divided. We are the culmination of the most ambitious project humanity has ever attempted." Through the feeds, I could see surface dwellers and underground citizens alike pausing to listen. In New Denver's tunnels, the invading forces slowed, sensing something changing in the very air around them. 60 years ago, humanity detected the Harbinger fleet approaching our solar system. But it wasn't the first time. Evidence buried in our oldest ruins proved they'd been here before, thousands of years ago. And they would keep coming back, again and again, until they stripped our world bare. Echo's arm interfaced with Protocol Lazarus's systems, broadcasting the proof alongside my words. Ancient records, technological analyses, the true purpose of the Generation Project. Our ancestors made a choice. Instead of fighting a war we couldn't win, we would change the game. Underground, we developed technological integration and collective computational abilities through our city networks. On the surface, we evolved biological adaptations and environmental manipulation capabilities. Apart, we were vulnerable. Together? I looked at Helen, who nodded and pressed her hand to the facility's central control panel. Her advanced biology interfaced seamlessly with the ancient technology, just as it had been designed to do. "Together," she continued, her voice joining the broadcast, "we are something new. Something the Harbingers have never encountered. Every underground city is part of a vast neural network. Every surface settlement is part of a biological adaptation web. Apart, we were preparing. Together, we are transcending." Through the displays, we watched as understanding spread across both populations. In New Denver's tunnels, surface allies turned to face the Harbinger forces they'd been leading. Their bodies began to glow with internal energy, matching the frequencies of the underground power systems. "You wanted our world?" I broadcasted to the alien ships above. "Here it is. All of it. Everything we are." Echo's arm sparked as he activated the final protocols. Every underground city on Earth powered up simultaneously, their neural networks syncing with the evolved biology of the surface populations. 60 years of preparation, of guided development both technological and biological, culminating in a single moment of unity. The Harbinger forces in the tunnels realized too late what was happening. Energy coursed through the city circuits, amplified by the collective consciousness of the underground population. On the surface, evolved humans began to shine with accumulated power, their adapted bodies serving as conduits for something entirely new. "My grandmother had a theory," I said, watching as the trap closed. "She believed that consciousness itself was the most powerful force in the universe. That properly developed, properly unified, it could rewrite the rules of reality itself. The underground cities? They're not just habitats or circuit boards. They're consciousness accelerators. And the surface adaptations? They're not just evolutionary changes. They're consciousness amplifiers." Through the facility's windows, we could see the Harbinger ships attempting to retreat. But Earth's atmosphere had changed, transformed by the unified will of two branches of humanity coming together as one. We didn't hide underground because we were afraid, Helen broadcasted, her body glowing with accumulated power. We went underground to become the foundation. The surface wasn't abandoned. It was transformed into an antenna. And now, after 60 years of preparation, humanity isn't just a species anymore. Echo's glasses displayed the final readings as power levels exceeded anything our ancestors had predicted. "We are the trap," he said simply. The Harbinger ships found themselves caught in fields of pure consciousness, their technology useless against something that transcended physical laws. The surface allies they'd recruited now served as conduits, channeling the combined power of two forms of human evolution into something entirely new. In New Denver's tunnels, the invading forces discovered that physical weapons meant nothing when reality itself could be rewritten by unified human consciousness. The city circuits, powered by millions of linked minds, bent space in ways that defied their understanding. "Your ancestors," Helen said, turning to me as the final phase began. "They knew we would feel betrayed, that the surface populations would resist when the underground cities revealed themselves. The Harbingers didn't just give us a common enemy, they gave us a reason to look past our differences at exactly the right moment." Through the displays, we watched as the Harbinger fleet was systematically dismantled, not by weapons or force, but by the unified will of a species that had spent 60 years preparing to transcend its own limitations. "So what happens now?" Echo asked, his arm processing the incredible amounts of data being generated by humanity's transformation. I looked at the sunrise breaking over a world that would never be the same. Now we find out what humanity can really become, together." The facility systems showed the last Harbinger ships trying to flee the solar system. But Earth's unified consciousness reached far beyond our atmosphere now. There would be no escape, no warning to the rest of their kind. Humanity had remade itself into something unprecedented, and our world would never be threatened by harvesters again. "Your parents would be proud," Helen said softly. "They died believing this day would come, believing that humanity would rise not just from the ground, but from our own limitations." I touched the wall of Protocol Lazarus, feeling the thrum of power that connected every human on and below Earth's surface. They didn't die, I realized. None of them did. They're part of this now, part of everything we've become. Echo's glasses displayed the final calculations as humanity's transformation stabilized. The Generation Project succeeded beyond anyone's predictions. We're not just united, we're evolving into something entirely new. Something that exists in consciousness as much as reality. Outside, the sun rose on a changed world. Underground cities and surface settlements were already beginning to merge, creating something that was neither yet both. Humanity had not just survived the Harbingers, we had used their own predatory nature to trigger our own transcendence. I thought about my grandmother's final message, understanding it fully at last. We hadn't gone underground to hide from a dying world. We hadn't evolved on the surface just to survive. Every step, every sacrifice, every secret had led to this moment of unified transformation. The ground moved, but not from alien drills or ancient machinery. It moved because humanity willed it to move, because we had become something more than our ancestors had ever dreamed possible. And somewhere, in the vast consciousness we had become, I felt my parents' pride.